All right, we're looking at learning target 10, retake ticket. In this learning target, we basically need to name angles. And so the first thing I'm going to do is just write down a list of all the angles that we could possibly use below this box here. The first is corresponding angles. Those are angles that are in the same position. The next is alternate interior angles. Those are on the inside, but cross over the transversal. Along the same lines, there's alternate exterior. And then finally, we have consecutive interior. And we'll go through one of each of these in the 4 examples up above. The reason I've grouped them this way is that I want to remind you that all of these, when lines are parallel, they are congruent, while this, when lines are parallel, they're supplementary. So it's kind of your job to look and see what is given to you in the proof. What do you know? What do you see? You really got to study each of these, because every single symbol in this just two-step proof is going to be important. Now, the other thing that I want to go over before we begin is kind of the approach that we use when writing these reasons. And for me, it's easiest if I write it as a conditional statement. If, and then in this spot goes a blank, and a then, and a blank. And though it's fairly simple, it can be a little bit confusing what goes in the if part and then what goes in the then part. So first, the if. If is always going to be what you know. Okay? This is going to be statement 1. Okay? And if we get into more complex proofs, it's the statements above it. If you know lines are parallel, from statement 1. If you know that corresponding angles are congruent, from statement 1. Then the then part is going, what are you trying to prove? Okay, and that's going to be statement 2. So we're going to go up to this first example and really, take a look at that. Statement 1 is lines parallel. I'll highlight that right here. We know that these two lines are parallel. It's given to us. We've got the parallel marks on them. And here's what we're going to write in our reason. If lines parallel. Now, that shouldn't be hard. We could go through each one of these and just identify what we are told. So you have to kind of interpret. I don't want this exact statement. I want you to tell me what the statement is saying. What is the general purpose of that, or what is the point? Okay, so we've got our if part. That's statement number 1. What's going to be our conclusion? Well, it says that 3 and 5 are congruent. We need to identify what kind of angles 3 and 5 are. They're interior angles. They are on opposite sides. So we know that if lines are parallel, then alternate, and I'm abbreviating this, interior angles are congruent. We stop right there. A couple of important things that you should have. First off, you need the name of the angle. So we need alternate interior. We're looking for alternate interior. Second, we should definitely say that they are congruent. Okay, we need congruent in this statement. They're not supplementary. They don't, add to 90. They are congruent. All right, let's go over to statement B. This one is a little bit different order, but nonetheless, you follow the same pattern. First off, we look at statement 1. It says that if statement 1, number 1 and number 5. So 1 is here, and number 5 is right there. What kind of angles are those? Those are corresponding angles. So if corresponding angles are congruent, okay? That's what that statement tells us. You had to write out that entire idea. If corresponding angles are congruent. It's not enough just to say corresponding angles. It's not enough just to say angles congruent. You need to put it all together. If corresponding angles are congruent, then what do we conclude in statement 2? Lines are parallel. And again, we can use the symbol for parallel. We're interpreting what is told in 2 and putting that in to our reason. Okay, letter C, excuse me. We've got angle 2 in our statement is congruent to angle 8. Okay, so I'll start with my if. Okay, looking at my statement 1, what do we already know? Well, we know 2 is congruent to 8. Those are alternate interior angles, and we know what about those alternate interior angles? That the alternate interior angles are congruent. Okay, if the alternate interior angles are congruent, then statement 2, lines parallel. So the formula doesn't change, but what you are told in number 1 and what we are trying to prove in number 2 does. Okay, but it still will always kind of follow this same pattern. If, what do you know? Okay, that's from statement 1. And then what are we showing? That's in statement 2. So last one, I'm going to write it out even before. It's going to be if, what do we see? Then what are we trying to prove? So what do we see in statement 1? Well, it says that M is parallel to N. So it says that if lines are parallel, then, well, what is 3 and 6? 3 and 6, these are consecutive interior angles. In consecutive interior angles, notice that this is a very different statement than before. These are supplementary. They add to 180. So we say consecutive interior angles supplementary. Can't say congruent, okay? It does not say congruent over here. Make sure that you match up the statement with what you are writing.